It's Bigfoot Collectors Club with Bryce and Michael. I know a ghost story or two. Let's do this.
Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. I am your host, Michael McMillan. With me always is your other host,
Bryce Johnson.
And super producer,
Riley Bray.
Guys, wet, hot, alien summer begins.
Is that a thing?
Yes, all summer long, we will be focusing on stories of the extraterrestrial variety, both here and on the other side. Available right now on the BCC Patreon is our Bigfoot Movie Club review of The Vast of Night, a brand new sci-fi indie that we are all obsessed with. So if you're interested and able to support the show and unlock 3 to 5 bonus episodes every month, head on over to patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club and support BCC for a pledge of only $5 a month. But yes, it is wet, hot, alien summer. The credit of that name goes to Mr. Riley Bray. I was going to call it...
I'm so glad you went with that.
I was going to call it something different.
I was like, please use this.
I was going to use something different, and I was like, no, that's way better than what I had.
That's
so
perfect.
Let's go.
Although I don't know what
with
makes it
that.
wet, but I'm curious to find out.
Well, you find out in those encounters, man. Close encounters.
All right, I want to get right into the show. Today's guest is an LA-based comic and writer. You may have seen her appear on such shows as All Rise, Tacoma FD, and Drunk History, just to name a few. She co-hosts the podcast Mega alongside past guest Greg Hess. Boys and girls, please give a warm Club Scout salute to Holly Laurent.
Hello. Hello.
Did I pronounce it? I should have asked if it's Laurent or Laurent or Laurent.
I love it when people do the fancy French way, like Laurent. Because I'm like, ooh, I'm not to be trifled with. But like most people, I kind of say Laurent.
Okay.
But my like Midwestern, like Michigan trash family's always like Laurent.
All right, well then let me redo this. We're going to go back and I'm going to say, boys and girls, please give a warm Club Scout salute to Holly Laurent.
Yay!
Yeah. Ooh. Now do one the fancy French way.
Boys and girls, please give a Cub
Holly.
Yeah, Bryce, you better do it.
Holly
French.
Laurent, huh?
It's bad. It's bad.
Très
There we
bon,
go.
très bon, très bon.
Holly Laurent.
There it is. It was only a matter of time.
Holly, welcome to the show.
God bless. So
How are
good
you?
to be here.
How are you surviving this wet, hot alien summer?
Whew, good days and bad. Sometimes just pacing in circles and rocking in the fetal position. Other days just smoking pot during the daytime hours and like giggling my troubles away.
Jealous.
That works too.
So jealous.
Moments of productivity in there. Lots of dog walks, but it's just up and down. And then, there are some medium days too. So I do have like dark days where I'm just like, oh, despair and death, it looms. But then other days I'm like, okay, count your blessings, like attitude of gratitude and all that shit.
Yep.
Yeah. But honestly, the protests have helped. And we've tried to stay socially distant and masked and everything and like be as safe as we can with the protests. But once I started going to the protest, it's the first thing that has made me feel kind of feel hope or encouraged when you just see the numbers and the beauty and the unity and the like using your voices and showing up. And it's helped. It's definitely
It's a
helped.
boost.
Yeah. And, Michael, I don't know about like Riley and Bryce, but in me and Michael's neighborhood, like the helicopters there for a while at the beginning were starting to make me feel like a crazy kind of like meerkat, like sticking my little head out of my hole and then just like sitting in my hidey hole, like just with the whole like roof shaking and just being like, what in the hell?
It has felt very apocalyptic living in Hollywood lately.
Yeah.
And I don't even think you know this, Holly, but we had a fire in our neighborhood recently.
Jesus.
My neighbor's compost caught fire in the heat. And
What?
we had right
Oh,
next
yeah.
door to me out back, we had flames like 12 feet high that my entire building and our neighbor's bungalow next door, we all ran out. We started putting out the fire, and the fire department came out and finished the job, of course. Thank you. But I was just like, what? I heard this like crazy snapping sound. And I almost thought a water main had broken and water was slapping onto the concrete. And I glanced out my window and saw two of my neighbors in my building run down the driveway like World War Z style. And I was like, what is going on? And I looked out the window and just saw these roaring flames. And I was like, fuck. This is all we need right now is our entire building to burn down.
What do they think
So-
happened? It just spontaneously combusted,
That's
or
what they think. Yeah, that they're in these big Rubbermaid containers, and there's sort of an excess of brush around that area of the garden as well. So
I've never heard of that. That's
I know.
wild.
Well,
Compost?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
compost
all
gets
that
very
just-
warm.
Well, all
That's
that
a thing.
Yeah, all that gas inside of the, all the oxidization and everything that's building up inside of those containers. Sometimes they can catch on fire, or some of the brush around it caught fire in the heat and then set fire to the compost tank.
Wow.
Yeah, the decomposting process though, it produces a lot of heat. And so
Right.
that's a thing. That's not like a mystery.
Okay.
This is why we needed Riley
Why-
around.
Riley,
this
you think I was
weekend.
gonna like make it a mystery? I don't
A
know.
little
Maybe
bit.
it could have
Yeah,
been
you were like
a person went out there and
spontaneous
just spontaneously combusted, and that's what happened.
Maybe Yuri Geller was there.
Those were
and-
big in the 80s, you know.
I was just heading that one off at the pass there. Yeah.
I don't know. UFO. It could have been a UFO beam. I'm just saying.
Just saying. Well, speaking of the end of the world, we have some, Riley, this is a cue for you.
BCC News. I feel like you're trying to do it off time now.
I'm not, because I'm starting and you're coming in late. every
No,
time.
dude. It's 1, 2, 3, go.
1, 2, 3. BCC News.
There you go.
I did it right on 3.
There it is. There
You're
it is.
behind. That was
No.
not in sync on my end. Okay, here we go. I have one to kick us off. I don't know if you guys saw this, Holly. I don't know if you're up to date on the Mayan calendar from 2012, but here we go. The New York Post just reported alternate reading of Mayan calendar suggests end of the world is this week.
I'm
Whoa.
so glad you're doing this one.
This one was sent in to me by my sister, shout out Sarah, who sent it to me last night. I might have
I
missed
saw
it
this
otherwise.
article. It's so great.
If you thought COVID-19, civil unrest, locusts, volcanic eruptions, and hurricanes signaled Armageddon, you may be right. The reading of the Mayan calendar was wrong, according to a conspiracy theory on Twitter, and while the world didn't end on December 21st, 2012, as originally prophesized by calendar readers, Mayan doomsday is sometime this week or next. Following the Julian calendar, we are technically in 2012. The number of days lost in a year due to the shift into Gregorian calendar is 11 days. And then they do a bunch of math. And basically, all that missing time adds up to 8 years, scientist Paolo Tagalugin tweeted last week, according to The Sun. The series of tweets has since been deleted. If Tagalugin is correct, adding up all the missed days, then the Mayan doomsday date is this week. Specifically, this Sunday, June 21st, I believe.
I could just hear the-
solstice.
I could just hear the calculator going, and just add some conspiracy math in there. Oh, and there we
Yeah.
go. Perfect.
I mean, literally, it's like 11 days equals 2,948 days. 2,948 days divided by 365 days. I mean, it's just basic math. I don't know why it looks so complicated to me. This is why I could never read the Mayan calendar.
Holly brings up a point, though, is so that falls on the summer solstice, huh? That's interesting.
Yeah.
That is
Because
interesting.
because the original date, I think it was December 21st, 2012.
December
fell on winter
12th, 2012.
Yeah, that's what I said. It
No,
fell
December
on winter
21st.
solstice.
You're right. Yeah,
December
December
fell on
21st.
winter solstice.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's interesting.
Mayan calendar fans say, no, we did line up with the Galactic Center on December 21st, 2012, and the shift has been happening ever since then.
Yeah,
It's,
I would
it's
agree
not
with
like
that, yeah.
It's not like an end of the world. It's just a shift in consciousness. But you know what? If it is a shift in consciousness, it's lining up perfectly.
Yeah.
Holly, did you ever get into that 2012 doomsday stuff?
I mean, I vaguely even remember hearing about it, and I always am like, God, I hope so, because I'm getting tired. But my question is, according to the Mayans, when that was kind of all set in place, my question is, what was their idea of what the world was? Because I always think of that like with the story of Noah's Ark, like the people were like, the whole world flooded, and it was probably because their village flooded, and to them that was the whole world. And then like evangelicals come later and have to try to come up with scientific explanations for how you would like flood the entire planet Earth, like and so it's like, oh, what did they think the world is?
That's a good question that I don't have an answer to. I just know that from reading about it during the time, from what I recall, and Bryce, back me up if you know any of this stuff, but basically there were like, they saw the world going through these mega, basically like sun cycles that lasted like some would last like 5,000 years or 3,000 years. But basically they created a calendar that mapped out their entire timeline, and it ends at this certain point, which was originally December 21st, 2012. It was supposed to align with the return of Quetzalcoatl, who was a winged serpent god that, and the serpent and the bird merged together represents matter and spirit coming together as one. The snake being, bound to earth, and birds being bound to the sky. That there was this idea of this was a time when sort of the spiritual realm and the human realm, or the material world, would come together once again.
Yeah, it was a really fascinating thing. So the Mayans had a really accurate account of their cosmology and astronomical charts as well, which is sort of confounding to a lot of archaeologists. And they had these three different calendars. One was the short count calendar, and then there was a medium count calendar, and then there was this long count calendar that ran in terms of like tens of thousands of years. And all their other calendars ended. They didn't end. They just kept going. But it was this one long count calendar that had an end date, which kind of caused everybody to go, wow, why is this one ending? Why doesn't the cycle continue on this? But they were adamant that no, it ends here. So that, I think that's what kind of gave everybody a big stir of like, what's going to happen when it does end?
But I don't know if they thought that we were flat Earth sitting on top of a turtle. Right. I don't know. I don't know like what their idea of the globe.
Well, I don't know that we're not.
Yeah, right.
You can't prove it. I also think it's interesting, the shift in consciousness. Like that to me is like, yeah, God, I hope so. That could make total sense. And I just was hearing Margaret Atwood talk on the Sugar Calling podcast, and Margaret Atwood was talking about how we're in a really painful shift, just in terms of her sort of theory, or the way she views it, is that like culture is kind of defined by the energy that fuels that culture. So we've been in a culture fueled by very cheap energy. Like as long as we were burning oil, it was really cheap. And so we were in a culture of consumption and waste. And she was like, that we're right now feeling like an incredible, painful, growing pain of actually moving from cheap oil energy to like more sustainable energy. And we probably won't do it on our own. We'll have to be forced to do it in the way we have to really be forced into doing most things, like we're seeing right now with like the protests and stuff. It's like we've been seeing this our whole lives, and we were all just sort of like wringing our hands and like, oh boy, and now it's like we're going to have to be forced to make these changes. But like her thing was that like moving into sustainable energy will create a culture of conservation rather than cheap energy creating a culture of consumption, and that it's going to like really hurt for a while because we're just so steeped in in the bullshit that feels really comfortable and normal to us. And like moving from consumption and waste to conservation is going to be a good thing, but it's going to like suck in terms of those growing pains, I guess. I thought that was kind of interesting, and that might be like part of what is happening right now with all of this bullshit.
Yeah, well, I think we can all agree big changes are afoot all over, so um,
Hmm.
it definitely is crazy times. I think we're also moving into the age of Aquarius too, astrologically, for whatever's that worth.
Ooh, what does that
Um,
mean?
I don't know. We'd have to talk to a few people who probably have some more knowledge in astrology and stuff like that. But I think I forget what I think these cycles last about 2,000 to
2,000
2,500
years.
years or something like that. In terms of the they call it the precession of the equinox or something like that.
Yep.
And
Ooh.
but anyway, so we're moving into a whole new astrological time, this age of Aquarius, where supposedly you know, where sort of some female power exists as opposed to getting rid of some of that old masculine energy of the chart we were in. For what cycle are we in now? Do you
Well,
know,
we're
Michael?
in
Or?
Aquarius now. I think it
Right.
shifted during the 60s, and prior to that, we had been in the age of Pisces for
Yeah.
2,000 years, which aligns with Christianity's reign and basically like spread throughout the Western world. And of course, it's interesting because the fish is
Fish,
also a
Jesus.
symbol for
Right.
Christ. And then the 2,000 years before that, it was Aries, which is the ram,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the Old Testament and pre-Christian gods are associated, like the devil are associated with horns
Yeah,
and like the
pagan and
golden calf and all this stuff. So it's this idea of a lot of the ram symbology became evil during the Pisces era because it was looking back on the old and vilifying what came before it
Oh.
to sort of encourage culture to be afraid of it and move forward.
wild.
So there's this really great maybe I can find the link and there's this great YouTube video that's narrated by why can't I think of his name? It's
Gary
Darth Vader's
Busey?
voice. No, Darth Vader's voice. Who'd you say?
James Earl Jones.
Yeah. James Earl Jones about like the Kali Yuga, the great year, and the sort of the cycle and procession of the equinox. It's really, really fascinating stuff. But
Oh.
I don't know. Astrology is way over my head. No pun intended.
It's
But
funny. Speaking of the solstice, I was at a winter solstice in December, this just past December, with this like shaman, and it was like really bananas and like super woo woo, and everyone had to like burn these things and and there were like these drum chants and stuff. It was kind of great. I was like, what's going on? But the shaman did this big thing about how like exactly what you just said, like the energy of the earth has been shifting from masculine to feminine, and so it's like, and it was like expressing itself out through Tibet, and that's why there was such a like sort of like spiritual thing going on over in Tibet, but it was expressing itself masculinely, and now it's moving and it's shifting somewhere over to like, I don't remember where the shaman was saying it's shifting to, it's going to be expressing itself or coming out of somewhere, I think like South America or something, and so it's expressing itself as feminine now. And so like a lot of this like raging before the dawning of the light with like, people like our current administration and stuff is just this like like the kids not wanting to go to bed type of thing.
mhm.
Yep.
Gets this idea of the return of the goddess, and we see that in a lot of pop culture. There's a great anime film called Persephone that came out. I think it's Persephone came out about. It's been 10 years at least. No, Paprika. Paprika is the name of the movie. But it's all about this like idea of the return of the goddess. And even the new Star Wars trilogy is all about the women of the Star Wars world taking
Wow.
back the balance and creating balance after the patriarchy had run afoul in the first two movies, or two trilogies.
Yeah.
There's
like, you see it when you look around.
Yeah.
There was a great book I have to recommend. I loved it. It was by an author named Gary S. Bobroff, but it was called Jung, Synchronicity, and the Return of the Feminine Archetype. And it just goes into like, crop glyphs and sort of all these sort of mystical experiences and high strangeness accounts and of course crop circles and how they sort of tell this reemergence of the feminine archetype. It's really wild. But yeah, there's something there. I can't exactly put my thumb on it, but
Yeah, cool.
Good stuff.
yeah.
Holly, it's your turn to take
to-
the wheel.
Oh, I was going to say I have a little piece of news here.
Yeah.
So this was reported out of Express website out of the UK. The SpaceX launch mystery. NASA video feed cuts out seconds after sighting of UFO closing in. So this was reported SpaceX launched 58 satellites into space on Saturday as part of its historic Starlink mission. But a mysterious sighting of UFOs during the live NASA stream on the rocket sent social media into meltdown. The incredible sighting of a UFO approaching a SpaceX rocket on Saturday sparked a social media frenzy. The mysterious object could be seen flying at high speed towards the Falcon 9 rocket before abruptly stopping. However, the NASA live stream of the launch was suddenly cut off just 1 second after the sighting, triggering claims of a UFO cover-up online. It reminds me of those old, the old launchings of the Apollo missions and those Saturn rockets when you'd see those, the NASA would cut off the feed and those old radio ham operators would still pick up some of the transmissions between the astronauts and where they would report seeing something outside their window, So it's very mysterious.
You can pick up astronaut radio on a ham radio?
Well, I think so. Maybe not a ham radio, but there's whenever they do launches, there's those independent radio traffickers who pick up on those transmissions. They pirate radio,
Yes.
Wow.
I saw those videos. I mean, there's definitely like a bright white light shooting past one of the ship and the dragon or whatever it's called. And then in another video, and we'll post all these links in our show notes. One of it looks like something that might be falling off the rocket, like a piece of equipment, but I don't know. It's so hard to tell because you're looking at space. Who knows what's? I don't know. You know what I mean? It's hard to tell. But Holly, do you think that some aliens might be following around Elon Musk and the Falcon X rockets?
Fucking Elon Musk. I would say, you know what it's reminding me of, and I'm sure y'all have talked about this before, but it's really reminding me of, and this was happened earlier this year, like the fighter pilots who keep seeing stuff and like even recording it in their planes.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
Like that's the one that got me where I was like, I 100% believe it.
Fantastic. Yeah, and these videos look somewhat similar to that. It's like a tiny little pinprick of a light shooting past. I don't know. Who knows what it is?
And it doesn't have any like flight surfaces or like in terms of the way we understand the laws of physics and how something can fly, it like doesn't measure up. It doesn't add up of like, how is it doing that?
Yeah, well, nothing should be stopping if it's in orbit. There's no, physical law that would allow an object to be moving in space and then suddenly stop. That makes, absolutely no sense whatsoever. So, it's definitely strange and appears to be anomalous. So, I mean, dude, why wouldn't they be observing a launch like this? I mean, I have no doubt that there's, just like seeing those old NASA footage, you see those strange lights cross those video feeds. And God, it reminds me just of that. But
I think if that were the case, whatever these craft are observing are probably just like drones, like little probes of theirs that are zipping around. I don't think there's any entity necessarily in the craft piloting it, because these things seem really small.
Yeah. Riley, did you see the video? What is your take?
I didn't actually see that video, so I don't have one. Sorry.
Gotcha.
I didn't see it either, but who knows, even like they could be so advanced that like their essence could like not require very much space in terms of us thinking they need to physically be in there. Like maybe they are, but also maybe it's like consciousness in another realm. Like the way it's looking like our consciousness in the future will just be this like weird online thing or whatever.
Ollie, you're speaking our language right now.
I just think that so many of these, like my feeling is that yes, there's definitely stuff out there, and my heart tells me that like if they're checking in on us, my sad fear is that they're catching some like really like wicked bad energy like coming off this place in terms of like a real sort of elementary schoolyard type of conflict in terms of like, whoa, this species is incredibly like warlike and wasteful and like and just not exhibiting kind of like traits of, I would say, like advancing in terms of like consciousness and all that stuff. So like my fear is that they're somewhat worried about us and like not wanting us to cause problems for more things than us, and like maybe
Yeah.
we are going to destroy ourselves, and maybe they're watching that. My thought is that if there was I've never felt frightened of the otherness that's out there, because my thought is if they're advanced to the point where they can check on us or watch us or come in and snoop around and stuff, they're so much more advanced than us. And my guess is that the only way to advance is peace. Like we might just kill each other and drop a bunch of bombs and like lights out. Like, but if you really can embrace peace, that seems like the way forward in terms of being able to figure out how to advance. And so my guess is they're peaceful. But even if they were to destroy us, it would probably be because my guess is that's the better thing for an overall like greater truth or goodness. That it wouldn't be like that, just this malicious kind of like, let's go fuck with these fuck faces, like, but it's, it's not like the killer hornets who just want to come in and like eat the juicy shit inside our torso.
No, it's a very astute observation. And, that's sort of the same messaging that you get across the contact experiences. A lot of people, say these alien entities, like we'll show them visuals of deforestation and nuclear crisis and all that stuff. So yeah, that's definitely part of the messaging. And then there's the other side that can be like, maybe these things feed off negative emotions and energies. So, yeah, but yeah, I think you're right on the ball in assessing at least part of what this mystery is. That's the thing. Nobody really knows. I mean, because they haven't made their intentions clear. I mean, you get a lot of mixed messaging with aliens, and that's the problem.
They really need to fix their fucking brand. But don't you think it also could be that like we're just operating with so many rods and cones in our eyeballs and so many like grooves in our brains and like in our senses? I mean, we've got 5 senses. That doesn't seem like that much, and like we're sort of, it's like the Higgs field and the goldfish thing of like a goldfish is like, what the fuck do you mean water? You're talking about nothing or whatever. And that's what we're kind of doing in the Higgs field. We're like, oh, you're talking about nothingness. And like, I feel like a butterfly has so many more rods and cones in their eyeballs that they see thousands of colors or something. And we're like, nah, it's just Roy G. Biv,
Mm-hmm.
and,
Mm-hmm.
and like, we just,
Roy G. Biv, also the name of the man who sold my dad his first car.
that was a good Oldsmobile. But I think that that's a lot of what's going on too, is we're like the dot, it's just a dot and it's not moving and it doesn't seem to have wings and stuff. But it's also like, it could be like it could be appearing as something like, holy smokes. And we just don't have the senses or the brains or the eyeballs or the rods and cones or whatever to be able to see it. It could be there. We just are like,
or it only shows up.
Absolutely.
It only shows up as like orbs or a
Yeah.
silver disc instead of like its full manifestation. I don't want to cut you off, Bryce. Holly, you sound really open-minded. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we want to hear all about your personal paranormal history.
Okay.
And we're back with Holly Laurent. Bryce, what were you saying right before break?
Oh, I was just saying, Holly's got a great knack for this stuff. She was sort of describing what we've talked about before on the podcast, John Keel's super spectrum theory, which is really just that, these entities and creatures and aliens sort of manifest themselves outside of our visible spectrum and our audio spectrum. There's a whole array of waves and frequencies that we just can't pick up with our human sensory equipment. So, yeah, I mean, yeah. Who knows? Or even as Michael said, perhaps it's our consciousness that distorts the perception of what we're actually seeing as well. So one person sees it as an orange orb, the other person sees it as a green alien with wearing coveralls. So who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we know from contact that it's going to look like they're going to come to us as our dad or someone we're comfortable with.
On a
Yes.
beach. Holly,
Yes.
what is your personal paranormal history? How did you get into this stuff? I mean, you seem to have an imagination built for these kind of things. Have you ever witnessed anything? Were you into this stuff as a kid?
Yeah, I was sort of primed perfectly for this but in a weird, the specificity of mine is kind of cuckoo, um, because I was raised by my dad was an itinerant evangelical like leader traveling around the country, bringing the good news of the gospel to like tent revivals and high school assemblies and county fairs and stuff. And
Wow.
so I was like sort of behind the scenes seeing on both sides of the curtain in that world and like, whoa. And so as a kid, I was told, everything was God and Satan, angels and demons, heaven and hell. And it was this like dualistic thinking that was, I found it pretty painful and scary, but there was also a massive element of supernaturalism to it that really just kind of messed with my little kid brain. Cause like normally you would think that the sort of compassionate thing for an adult to do when a kid is scared is to be like, hey, there's no monsters. We just have big imaginations and whatever. But like all the adults in my life were like, no, you're surrounded by very real demons who are seeking to devour your soul at all times. Like they're climbing the walls, but they would be like, but the good news is the way they would comfort me is like, but there are also angels with fiery swords and they're fighting off those demons and the angels are working on your behalf. And so if you pray and call on the name of Jesus, like you're going to, and so it was a lot. And
So you grew up in like a hardcore high fantasy realm, basically,
Yeah,
where there's like an invisible war happening around you
Yes.
all the
Above your
time.
head, yeah.
And where I was with my little soft kid mushy brain at the time, I was like, it's 100% real. It's not like, listening to Harry Potter and then imagining this world of magic and dragons and giants and stuff. It was like, oh no, this is reality. And it took me, because my dad would like cast out demons and shit. And when as a little kid, you see someone foaming at the mouth, eyes rolled back in their head, like guttural noises coming from them. And it's like, my whole thing was just like, when he gets that demon out of it, and my dad would start this whole thing of like, in the powerful name of Jesus, I command you to come out of this woman. Like I release you in the powerful name of Jesus. You have no stronghold here, Satan. I'm binding you and sending you back to hell. And like all this, like really like Game of Thrones type of monologue shit. And
Wow.
and then as a kid, I'd just be like, oh shit. When the person would finally calm down, I'd be like, where did that demon go? I don't want it to get on me. Oh my God. And I thought it was so real. And so I would like develop all these crazy, like I would just walk around like whispering the name of Jesus all the time because I was sure that they don't like that name, I think. So they won't hitch a ride on me if I keep saying the name of Jesus and like all this like fear and stuff. But like it took me well into my God, probably late 20s to even be like, oh, epileptic seizures, like grand mal seizures are what look like, okay, guttural noises, eyes rolled back, foaming at the mouth. Got it. Okay. So they needed their neck stabilized. They did not need hands laid on them, And
Right.
but and it's still like, I will still like uncover little like rocks that have weird dogma under them in my brain where I'm like, whoa, that weird thing's still in there. I'll have to like check with my husband, Greg, a lot where I'll be like, wait, is this a thing? And he's like, no, that's crazy. And I'm like, okay.
Wow. So did you make a 180 coming from that sort of upbringing to, I mean, where are you at now with all of that stuff?
I don't know titles, but like, I guess I would describe myself now as like just like a secular humanist, atheist, but sometimes atheist can feel so like loaded or whatever. But definitely atheist. It's funny. I was like very atheist until I did mushrooms. And now I'm like, I don't know, there might be something, even if it's just some other form of like magic,
Yeah.
like what water is to a goldfish that's sort of around us all the time and stuff. And I don't know, but basically just like a pagan, atheist, heathen pervert now, I guess.
I
Was
thought
this
you
the
like titles.
infamous?
Yeah.
Was this the infamous mushroom trip that Greg told us about that ended with him hugging a rock and shitting into an ocean?
That
In
was a
Mexico?
good one. That was a really good one. That's the one where that one was maybe my biggest one where like the earth started sharing her sound with us and we could hear the
Oh,
sound
wow.
that the earth makes. It was fucking nuts. That like thing, we could hear like the like really fucking specific like the sort of like drone noise of the earth. It was really, really cool. And I was like, oh, you're alive. Wow. I'm an ant on you. And you're like, wow, you're really cool.
Yeah,
Whoa.
totally. Absolutely. That's wild.
Yeah.
When you were a kid, did you ever experience anything, or even a young adult, that any kind of encounter or anything that would reinforce the evangelical upbringing that you had?
Oh yeah, I mean, I experienced demons, and I look back now, and I'm like, okay, what was that? Was it a psychotic break? Was it a like sleep paralysis? Was it, you know how sometimes that sleep paralysis is like you're in a dream state, but you seem somewhat conscious. So it's like that threshold in between consciousness and unconsciousness or whatever. Like, is it that, or is it something from the outside in? Is it something from the inside out? Because I remember like at a lot of the like tent revival stuff that my dad used to do, when people would speak in tongues and stuff, which we weren't around the Pentecostal type that often. So whenever we were more just like straight up evangelical, like you got to like do the sinner's prayer and like get snagged out of hell and into heaven. But whenever we were around the Pentecostals and they would start with the slain in the spirit and the speaking in tongues, it like really super duper freaked me out. But then when I was like in college, like taking some world religions classes and stuff, I remember like, and this is when I still thought there was like an actual devil, like Satan, Lucifer, who had a stronghold on the earth and, but God was going to win in the end and we were all going to go to heaven or hell. I remember really feeling like, wait, I just had total pot brain. I have no idea where I was going with that. What was I talking about? I just really fell off the tightrope of this is why you don't smoke cannabis, kids. Where was I going with that? What did you ask me, Michael?
I was asking if you ever had an experience. You were talking about sleep paralysis, demons, things that reinforced that worldview in the evangelical church. And you were saying that you were basically the church is trying to get people out of hell.
Yeah. So when I would see people speak in tongues, and then later in college when I learned that like in satanic cults, I still believed in Satan at the time, and then I learned that in satanic cults they speak in tongues, and I was like, wait, how is that possible? Because if speaking in tongues is the Holy Spirit speaking the language of like a secret prayer language through you, that your soul is communicating with your heavenly Father in this like nonverbal state, but where your soul can express itself to its divine maker, blah, blah, blah. Then if Satanists can do it, then where's it coming from? Oh my God. And then it caused this thing in me where I was like, wait, so is it coming from the outside in, or is it just coming from the inside out and anybody can do it? Because then I was like, oh wait, they do that shit in Islam, and Christians like run of the mill Christians in America would be like, no, the Holy Spirit would not talk to a Muslim. They are not And so I'm like, wait, how's everybody doing this? Maybe it's from the inside out. And so sometimes, you're tapping into something in your brain or whatever. And so then I was like, oh, were all my demonic experiences like me tapping into something inside me? But I perceived it as coming from outside, because I remember these things where I would remember like the walls doing like a wonk wonk warping thing, and like a sort of like spinning kind of tornado energy coming down, and then the demon like slapping its whole like physicality onto the like entirety of my body and like sticking dark talons into my mouth so I couldn't speak.
That's Holly, heavy. This is terrifying.
Yeah. And it's like, And it's like, is that because as a kid I imagined those things and so I started to experiencing them? But then so it's like, where is that coming from? Is that me? Is that some like invisible monster? And it's funny because I just did my first written and directed by film. It's just like a 10-minute. I'll send it to you after this so you can watch it. But it's a 10-minute short called "Brought to You by Satan," and it's kind of a dark comedy that is a true story of like, it's basically a family grappling with the supernatural origins of a family dinner. And it's based on a true story where Greg and I were sitting at a dinner in an Italian restaurant with my mom and dad. And my dad looked across the table at me and he goes, "Hey, did I tell you too that tonight's dinner is brought to you by Satan?"
What?
And we were like, huh?
You're
And
like-
of course, my poor fucking husband, Greg, is like, say more.
Are
And
we
my-
high right now? Yeah.
Exactly. It's one of those things of like, did I get roofied or did I eat an edible I forgot about that's just now kicking in? And so anyway, my dad proceeds to go on this thing of like, oh, Hal, yeah, Tammy Hemphill, she's the sheriff down in Berrien County. She got a call one night when she was on patrol to go over to the address that came through on her lapel thing, and domestic disturbance, domestic violence, something like that. She goes over there knocking on the door, sheriff. She feels this dark presence, she's coming up to the house. She keeps knocking, sheriff. Nobody comes to the door. Finally, she opens the door and peeks her head in. And we're all like, wait, you can't do that. And he's like, he was responding to somebody who might need help. And we're like, okay. And so he like pokes his head in the door. And you know that thing that's on the countertop in the kitchen that you put all the knives in, that like black thing that all the knives go into? I don't know what that black thing is called. But anyway, all the knives have come out of that and they're hanging in the air. And butcher knives, steak knives, real menacing, and they're just all hanging in the air right there in the kitchen. And the sheriff's watching it, and all of a sudden, zoom, 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 they start flying across the room. She shuts the door. She hustles down to her patrol car. She's all shaken, right? And she calls me. And I said, Tammy, you did the right thing. And I don't know what I had going on that night. I had something going, I can't remember, but I couldn't go over there. So I called the assistant pastors at my church and I gave them the address that Tammy gave me, and they go over there. And as soon as they get to the property, they walk up and they go around the perimeter of the property, the address, and they pray a hedge of protection. And then they bind the evil one in the powerful name of Jesus. And then they send him back to Hades where he belongs. And then they come home. They give me a call. They say, hey, Bob, it's done. I call up Tammy. I go, hey, Tam, it should be good now. It's done. Tammy goes over there, knocks on the door. Everything's restored. Everything's back to normal. And anyway, she was so happy that I was able to clear the joint for her that she gave us this gift certificate to Papa Vino's tonight. So tonight's dinner is brought to you by Satan.
Jesus. Greg, did you ever get your side of mayo there?
Holly, why doesn't your dad have a reality show?
No shit, right? So yeah, Greg immediately just was like, excuse me, I have to use the restroom. And I'm like, you motherfucker, don't leave me here. And so anyway, I was just like, well, that's too good to be true. So I turned that into my first like comedy short. And it's kind of like a misdirect where you think it's going to kind of be a thriller, obviously.
That's
but then it's
amazing.
just, yeah. So, but I sit there and like Greg and I were laying in bed that night talking, and I'm just like, what the fuck do you think that was? And Greg's just like, I don't know. Maybe somebody was throwing knives and they were hiding behind an island or something. I don't know. And I'm like, but here's the thing. Like my dad and I look at the same fucking thing and we just, is it semantic? We just describe it differently. Like what my dad sees, I'm like, I look at it and I go, oh, that sounds like addiction and abuse. My dad looks at it and goes, oh, that's the powerful stronghold of Satan. But at the end of the day, doesn't like addiction and abuse feel like an invisible monster, like fucking sticking its talons into your fucking back? Yeah. And so is it just semantics? And Greg's like, nah, dude. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. So anyway,
or is it a ghost, a poltergeist, like
exactly.
an actual poltergeist that's throwing knives around? Like that's where my brain goes. Like,
exactly.
well, that's proof that there's ghosts.
Exactly. I'll send you my little film I did about it. But the reason I
Please.
even say all of that is because when I've had these like satanic and demonic experiences, I don't know like how much of it is semantics. And even like we were talking about with seeing orbs, with the senses that we've been given and the way we can experience it. Like I think my supernatural shit has been that way too. But I think I have some kind of sensitivity to it because shit happens to me all the time. And like I can only sort of compare it with Greg because he's the only person I live with now, and he doesn't have any shit like this happen to him ever. And
I think
Yeah.
he mentioned that when he was on the show, actually, and compared himself to you the same way.
I don't know where it comes from and why, but I don't know. Like for instance, we a couple years ago checked into this like old building. We had an Airbnb in Paris. And like as soon as we checked in, it was this beautiful old apartment, but the building was really, really old. And I just felt all this shit. And who knows, it could be that time is bendy. So you're feeling like all the different history and relationships and whatever, just because I'm sensitive to it or whatever. But the second that Greg fell asleep, like all these fucking bloodied, murdered, maimed horror scenes started to appear before me. And it was like one of the worst nights of my life where like they were all coming to me. It felt like the people who died in that building and really the ones that died violent deaths. And they were all showing themselves to me. And it felt like there was an appeal where they were like trying to be like seen, but also like this sense of like, can you do something? Like this was wrong or whatever. And I just the whole time was just like, oh my God, like quivering like a leaf and like, I don't want this. I don't want this. I'm scared. Oh my God. I don't know what to do. Like, yes, I can see you, but I am ill-equipped for how much this terrifies me, man. And then the worst one was I was looking at one. I was lying flat in bed and I was looking at one at the foot of the bed that was like a kid one that was like all bloody. And I was like, fucking A, man. And it just looked like a kid that basically got beat to death. And it was like, this is really more than my little ticker can bear. And I like turn to the side and I look at Greg, who's fast asleep, and he's on his side.
Motherfucker.
I know. Come on. What a gifted soul. And he always can sleep so well and can sleep anywhere. And as soon as he lays down, he's asleep. And I'm like, fuck you. but he's lying there facing me on his side. And all of a fucking sudden, this woman just comes up underneath him. Her whole body is lying on her back and he's face down. And so she comes up face up underneath him and he's face down and her face is just pressed right up against his face and she's making eye contact with me and is like pleading with me to like, you see me, right? You have to acknowledge me. And I just started screaming like, get away from him.
Wow.
Whoa.
Insane.
Isn't it? And so as soon as like Greg woke up, I like couldn't stop crying. And I was like, I'm honestly afraid to tell you of what has been happening tonight for fear that you will think I'm psychotic. And I told him the whole thing and I can't stop crying. And he just being very cool and not calling me psychotic. He was like, I don't know what to tell you other than that when this shit starts to happen, it seems like your instinct, because you're so fearful, your instinct is to say, no, I don't want this. This scares me. He was like, what if instead you just simply say yes and you wait and you just say yes and see what happens. He's like, you're a goddamn improviser. You've spent your whole life like training your DNA, your comedy DNA for yes and just say yes and what and see if it changes the dynamic. And I was like, oh,
does he mean acknowledge? Does he mean like acknowledge these things you're seeing?
I think
yes. Instead of pushing it away in fear, going, okay, I do see you.
What do you want? Right.
Yeah. And so I was like, all right, that's going to be hard, but like, let's go for it. And it was probably months later, maybe 4, 5, 6 months later, we had kind of been trying to get a little escape from LA and we went up to Ojai and we stayed at the Ojai Rancho Inn, which is one of my favorite little old, like, one of those places where you like drive right up to the room. It's only got like 8 or 10 rooms, and they're all open, and there's like a pool in the middle, and it's like an old motor lodge, and
Totally old motel.
love this old motel, and it has all these like it's all wooden walls, and Greg falls asleep immediately, and God damn it, and all of a sudden the wooden walls started like creaking and making noise, I think because the temperature was changing outside, and so the wood was sort of like shifting or whatever. And I was like, this is the laws of physics. This isn't supernatural. This is just the temperature is changing and the wood is shifting. But all of a sudden, like all the knots in the pine started going like opening, like the holes were like, it felt like all this like porthole shit. And I was like, here we go. And within an instant, like the room was full. Like it was full with what I call, from my old evangelical language, it was full of what I call a cloud of witnesses. Like they were just all there.
Whoa.
And they were all talking at the same time. And they were kind of like, it's sort of like that thin veil idea where I could see them, but it was more like just silhouette, but no like definition,
Yeah.
But packed. The room was packed, and they were all talking at once, and I was so scared. And I immediately started to like, no, please, 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 I don't want this. And I was like, oh wait. And I just stopped, and I was like, yes. And as soon as I said yes, they all got kind of quiet. And it was a man, is all I know, from the back of the cloud of witnesses. They all quieted down, and then he spoke, and he was like, I want to tell you something, but I want your permission first. And I was like, yes. And then he like moved through all the people like up to right in front of me. And he was like, you've been here 52 times and you're almost done. And I was like,
whoa.
And I was like, huh? And there was no feeling attached to it. It didn't feel positive. It didn't feel negative. It didn't feel scary. It didn't feel sad. It didn't feel happy. It didn't feel joyful. It just was. And I was like, okay. And then they all kind of just like dissipated. And I waited for Greg to wake up, and I was like, oh my God, you got to hear. I finally said yes. And this fucker told me that I've been here 52 times and then I'm almost done. Like, God, blah, blah, blah. And Greg's like, you don't believe in reincarnation. And I was like, I know, but I also don't fucking believe in ghosts. And they were all talking to me. And,
Right.
and I was like, and if I've been here 52 times, I'm like, times the math is 365 days a year. I'm like doing the math, and I'm like, I could have been Jesus.
Wow.
I'm like, I'm upwards of 2,000 years old. I could have been Jesus. So you got to fucking do whatever I say. And he was like, and Greg was like, but you don't believe in Jesus. And I was like, I am.
God, that is insane.
I mean, Holly,
In a great way.
it's clear that you're a medium. I mean, obviously, if in the world of this podcast, you're a medium, and you should maybe talk to another medium and work on figuring out how. I mean, it sounds like you can use your powers for good.
I know.
Do you
refine it?
Where's your family from? First of all, because I'm trying to pinpoint the accent, and I love it.
I got Minnesota.
Oh, close. I grew up in Southwest Michigan until I was 12, and then we moved to the suburbs of Chicago. So I think I have a pretty strong Chicago one.
Did your family have did being tent revival ministry, did that run in the family? Was your dad's dad, or was that something that's been passed down?
Yeah, in fact, both my grandpas were pastors. One was like a crazy fundamental Baptist pastor, like Bible banging, like pounding on the pulpit, fire and brimstone kind of like old sort of prairie shit. And then my other grandpa was just an American Baptist, kind of like your straight down the road Protestant kind of conservative, like church with a steeple in a small town, Niles, Michigan, like with a small congregation who would come together and we would sing 3 hymns, and then he'd give a message, and
Yeah, because I'm wondering, in my mind as I'm listening, I'm like, well, so what if this is a gift that runs in your family, but because of where your family grew up in the time that your grandfathers grew up, that instead of it funneling into like the spiritualist movement or funneling into like we're psychics and mediums, it all got crystallized in the wrapping, in the encasing of evangelicalism, of looking at this ability from a strictly religious point of view. What does cloud of witnesses mean? What does that term? That's a fascinating term I've never heard of.
Yeah.
It's a term in the Bible that basically describes like, I think it's sort of talking about like those who went before you who are now in heaven waiting for you, and also like the angel forces who are like fighting in your defense at all times around you. Like the Bible says that we are all like constantly surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses.
Your angel team.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how is that any different than like exactly what you described, like being able to tap into the spirit realm and people who have died ahead of you trying to give you some guidance? Or because the idea of like, so we have a recurring guest on our show, I'm sure she's listening, Adela Levine, who's a medium and an intuitive, and she often talks about how the spirit realm will kind of step on top of each other to get to speak, and one of the things you have to do is be like, all right, I'm taking a number, everybody, hold on, one at a time. And it sounds like in all of the stories that you were telling that, it's just all these people being like, oh, she can actually see and hear us. We got a live one. Please tell me what the fuck is going on. Or I have a message that I have to give you because the guy sleeping next to you can't hear me. You can. So of course it would all come rushing into your hotel room at once, desperately trying to get a message through.
Michael, I can't believe I've never thought about it like that, but that makes so much sense.
Yeah. Right. I mean, and it's not my idea, but that's fascinating that you haven't. But then that makes so much sense. Then, if you're growing up in a religious household and this is an ability that you have, or your grandfather had this, or even your dad, that they're like, oh yeah, it's angels and demons, of course, and that reinforces everything that they're doing. I'd be interested if your dad had any experiences like what you've had as a child, like watching the room throb or feeling like there's a demon in there.
Yeah. I bet he has. I bet he has. And it's interesting because like even as a kid, I would get premonitions and I would get visions of people that would always come true. And it's crazy. Like and I still have them all the time. Like the one that really bothered me that happened like a year ago is that I had this horrible premonition where I saw this like sort of caramel colored salamander, and it was trying to walk, but its back leg was smashed and it was like dragging its back leg. And I was like, like it was making me feel like shivery and like sort of sick all over. And I was like, oh no, what does this mean? What does this mean? And that day, my dog blew out her fucking knee and had to like get knee surgery. And then it took like 6 months to like get her to walk again. And I was like, Christ, like so like just weird kind of premonitions like that.
And your dog is caramel colored.
My dog is caramel colored. And it's like, oh God, stuff like that happens to me all the time. And I think it happens even in ways where I'll just disregard it or won't even like I'm just not giving it the right focus, or I'll just be like, oh, that's my weird brain. And like and it's hard too because my brain just does feel like it's different. And like I it's funny because I think I got into comedy, and every time I get a really good laugh on stage, I always kind of like have to do the math backwards and be like, wait, why did they laugh at that? Because usually and I act like, oh, I meant to be funny, but I like actually didn't. I just was saying the way I see the world, because when I try to act like a normal person, I get like strangely concrete, maybe almost like what it feels like for an autistic person to try to be like, okay, facial expressions and all that stuff that seems to come more naturally emotionally to other people who don't have that. Whose brains aren't like that. Like, for instance, the one I always tell is so dumb, but like one time Greg and I were like driving through this tiny town and sitting at a stoplight, and I'm looking at this building that says Eagle Storage. And I was like, wow, this place is wild. And Greg was like, why? What do you mean? And I was like, just that so many people around here would have eagles that they would need like a storage facility. And like, just like you, he laughed. And then I did this thing that I always do where I'm like, wait, why did he laugh? And then I act like I meant to be funny. And then it takes me a second to be like, oh, that's just the name of the storage facility, but there aren't eagles in there. But when I'm trying to be a regular human that like sees the world like other humans, like while I'm ignoring all this other shit, I'm like, oh, if that says eagle storage, there's eagles in there. I did this just the other day in LA, sitting at a stoplight. I saw this place called Silver Liquors. And I was like, Silver Liquors. I've heard of Goldschlager, but I've never heard of like, I don't know if you could drink silver. And like, I sat there thinking that for the longest time. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so dumb.
Holly, I think the world needs more people like you.
I second that. You are a fascinating guest.
I wish we could talk to you for another hour, but we have to move on with the rest of the show.
Let's go.
But we're going to do it with a fun game that we like to play with all of our guests. I'm going to go down. This is going to be really fun for you. I'm going to go down a list of phenomenon. And if you're open to it, you're going to say, believe it. If you're not open to it, you're going to say bullshit. Got it?
Got it.
This is a game we call bullshit
or believe it.
All right. Holly Laurent, on your mark. Get set. Ghosts.
Believe it.
UFOs.
Believe it.
Bigfoot.
I don't know. Bullshit?
Little gray aliens.
Well, that's the way our eyes see them, so believe it.
Out of
But they're really spectacular.
Out of body experiences.
Believe it for sure. Have had it. Just do mushrooms, baby.
Oh, brother. Demonic possession. Too many stories. This is great.
Demonic possession. Bullshit.
The Bermuda Triangle.
Oh, believe it.
Alien abductions.
Sure, believe it.
Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah, believe it.
Time travel.
100% that's actually true.
Mothman.
Don't know what it is, so I'm just going to say bullshit.
Reincarnation.
Even though I think it's true, I'm going to say bullshit because I just bullshit.
52 times, Holly.
I know.
ESP. 52. ESP.
Believe it.
Haunted houses.
Believe it, because I think it's just bendy time, and those people are there at the same time, and to them, you're the ghost.
The Illuminati.
I don't really know enough about it. Do you think
Nah, I think it's bullshit. I mean, I think it's all in plain sight. Like, bullshit. I mean, no one's asking me, but yeah, I think it's obvious who's in charge on this planet, and there's a face on Mars.
Bullshit.
Skunk ape.
I don't know what that is.
Well, you just unlocked a secret game. Bryce, get ready. Heaven.
Bullshit.
Hell.
Bullshit.
Sea serpents.
Believe it.
Poltergeists.
Bullshit.
Chupacabra.
Don't know what it is.
It's like they call it the goat sucker. It's like a little creature that sucks the blood out of goats.
Great. They call it the
every
goat
time
sucker.
You try to explain it as the goat sucker, it just becomes more confusing.
What it is.
Okay, so bullshit.
Atlantis.
Bullshit.
Life on other planets.
Definitely. I mean, not anywhere we can see, but way out there, yeah.
Parallel dimensions.
Absolutely believe it.
The apocalypse.
Well, I think we're looking at it, right?
Life after death.
God, I hope not. Bullshit.
All right. Congratulations. Real quick. Time travel. You said 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Because
I was listening to a Science Friday where they said if somebody knocks on your door and says, I'm your great, 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 great grandchild, you should believe them because they've figured it out. And like, there's no such thing as time. It doesn't appear in the rigorous math. There's nothing in physics that accounts for time. It's a sensation that we're having. But in whatever this thing is, we think of time like whenever, wherever, they have figured it out.
That was the most stoner thing that's ever been said on this show. Okay, we have Bryce. Because you don't know who Skunk Ape is, if people don't know who Skunk Ape is, it unlocks a secret game called Bryce has 60 seconds to sell Skunk Ape. So he's going to tell you what Skunk Ape is.
Holly, get a search engine ready if you have one nearby.
Okay.
Bryce, I'm setting the clock,
Okay.
and he's got 60 seconds to convince you that Skunk Ape is real. Get ready, Bryce. On your mark, get set, Skunk Ape.
Holly, so just type in Skunk Ape and then bring up the images. You should see like a couple images of this large hairy creature sort of bending over. There's actually two images. There's one, and then the other one, he sort of stands up a little bit and opens his mouth a little bit. So in Sarasota, Florida, an old lady sent an anonymous letter because she thought something was taking her apples out of her backyard. And she was really worried because, you know, she had grandkids that would often come over. So one night she took her camera outside and she said she took 30 pictures. Seconds. And as the flash went off, she caught the monster, the creature, and then she took one more picture, and it was sort of standing up as she took the second picture. Now you can see the canines on that creature and the refraction from its eyes. So, you know, it's definitely a biological creature. Now, this is just sort of the cousin of the Pacific Northwestern Bigfoot, only it inhabits the swamplands of Florida. Anyway, that's the Florida skunk ape. She thought somebody had lost an orangutan.
2, 1, done. Holly, do you buy Skunk Ape?
That's somebody in a costume.
Sorry, Bryce, you lose 60 seconds to sell Skunk Ape. Okay, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for this week's story of high strangeness and the kickoff of wet, hot alien summer here on Bigfoot Collectors Club.
Woohoo!
Okay, guys, it's back. It's back. The show is back. It's back. Bigfoot Collectors Club, we're kicking off our summer of alien fun with a story of high strangeness that traces back to the origins of my fascination with the subject of the unknown and the unexplained. This is a story that I first came across as a boy while watching the scariest show ever made, Unsolved Mysteries.
So good.
And I actually went back for this and rewatched the episode that terrified me as a child, which turns out to not be very scary at all. But you know why this might get me a little spooked. This is the story of the KECKSBURG UFO crash. So, December 9th, 1965, a fireball shoots across the twilight sky over Pennsylvania, having traveled hundreds of miles from the north over Ontario, taking a 25-degree turn over Cleveland, and then winding its way towards a village of KECKSBURG, Pennsylvania, located 30 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. KECKSBURG, it should be noted, sits at the eastern end of the Ohio River Valley, an area that's rife with high strangeness, as many of our previous episodes have explored. At 4:47 p.m. on December 9th, 1965, eyewitnesses, many of them children at the time, like Roy and Rob Landry, two brothers, watched the fireball as it zoomed overhead, spitting colors of orange, red, and purple in its trail. Kevin Kalb and his sister Nadine were in the yard of their farmhouse when they saw the fireball streak across the sky and crash into the nearby woods down in a ravine. They rushed indoors to tell their mother, Frances Kalb, who had been listening to reports of the strange object on the local radio station KDKA. And this is a reference to, just sidebarring here, the film The Vast of Night, which we reviewed over on the other side, takes part of its inspiration from this story. And the radio DJ who was taking calls all night long from eyewitnesses saying they saw this strange object streak across the sky. So he's taking calls from local residents concerned that it might be a crashing airplane. And Frances called in to the show to say it wasn't an airplane, or if it were, it was only a piece of one because it just landed across the field down the hill from her home and she could see smoke rising up from the tree line. She hung up, satisfied and ready to move on with her evening. But 2 to 3 minutes later, Frances received a phone call from the U.S. Navy, who had heard her on the radio and told her to keep an eye out and call back if anything strange happened. Should I call the fire department, she asked. No, call us and we'll call them. Frances hung up the phone and quickly called her girlfriend to tell her the news. And less than a minute into that conversation, the switchboard operator interrupted and told Frances that state police were on the line. They needed to speak with her urgently. Not long after she hung up with the police, a state trooper showed up with 2 unidentified men in civilian clothes carrying radiation detectors. The 2 men headed down into the woods as locals began gathering at the Calp farm to get a glimpse of what Frances had reported on the radio. Frances turned to the state trooper, confused, and asked, "Why are there so many people interested in seeing this thing?" He responded with, "They think they're going to see something, but when it comes out of here, they won't see anything." Around dark, volunteer fireman Jim Mays guided 2 state troopers out to the crash site, and he claimed that he could see bright blue flashing lights illuminating from the object in the distance, kind of like welder's lights at timed intervals. The area was put on lockdown by police, and 30 volunteer firemen headed out to the site. The UFO had dragged along the earth as it crashed, raking up the ground in its wake, creating a trench before finally coming to a halt halfway buried out in the woods. Now, one of the volunteer firemen was a guy named James Romansky. He told his experience to Unsolved Mysteries. It was a humongous metal object buried in the ground about 6 feet out, 6 feet around, and at every bit 10 to 12 feet long. And it looked to me exactly like a fresh acorn. No wings, no motors, no propellers, no identification as to the type of aircraft that I would have known. There was a bumper running along the bottom part of it. Along that bumper, what I called, it looked to me like ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Star shapes, figures, circles, and lines. Romansky spent the next 25 years studying world languages and symbols, both modern and ancient, and claimed that he has never seen anything that came close to resembling what he saw written on this giant acorn craft.
Weird.
As the local firemen stood around the object examining it, the military arrived on the scene and proclaimed that the site was now quarantined and everyone had to leave. The military was in charge now. Within 3 hours, the KECKSBURG fire station was filled with military men who set up a command center. They also commandeered the Hayes farmhouse near the ravine. The commanding officers told Lillian Hayes to send her children to bed and started making mysterious phone calls to various government agencies, calls which never appeared on the Hayes family phone bill. Local resident Bill Weaver was 19 at the time, and just one of the many rubberneckers that had parked in the field overlooking the crash site. They could all see bright lights down in the wooded ravine. Weaver recalls a truck showing up and guys dressed in full moon suits unloaded giant white boxes, too small to fit the large Volkswagen-sized craft, but large enough to carry any contents that might be found within the object itself. Army officers arrived and ordered the crowd to disperse, telling Bill Weaver if he didn't leave, they'd confiscate his car. And everybody knows that in 1965, the most important thing to a 19-year-old boy is his car.
Hell yeah.
They provided no answers to the questions, what the hell is going on? And what is that thing? James Romansky, the volunteer fireman who described the strange writing on the object, saw a flatbed truck take the Volkswagen-sized acorn object away, covered beneath the tarp. This detail is corroborated by John Hayes, a boy at the time who remembers watching the truck with the tarp covering the object going past his bedroom window at night. UFO researcher Stan Gordon studied the KECKSBURG case for years, which, to me, Michael, rivals Roswell in its significance. And there's no bodies or pilots reported by eyewitnesses, but the actual crash site has far more civilian eyewitnesses than the crash that happened in Corona, New Mexico back in 1947. That had been discovered by a lonely ranch hand, Mac Brazel. But here, we have dozens and dozens of eyewitnesses seeing this object in the woods, let alone 30 volunteer firemen who got an up-close look at it. Now, many theories as to what the Kecksburg UFO was have been made, and the first is the official explanation put forth by the U.S. Air Force. It was a meteorite. Stan Gordon flatly refuses this explanation, not only because of the description of the object by the witnesses like Romansky, but also because of the zigzaggy flight pattern of the object as it twisted and turned in the night skies over North America that night. Witnesses in different cities even claimed that the object seemed to slow down as it descended, suggesting that some type of intelligence was doing its best to guide it. Another theory is that the object was spaceborne, but perhaps a capsule or a satellite. There's a recent theory that it was a U.S. spy satellite that crashed and was meant to spy on the Russians during the Cold War. However, there is no NASA logging of space debris crashing in Kecksburg on the night of December 9th, 1965. And what's up with
satellites
that?
don't zigzag anyway, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and what's up with that strange writing? So another theory points out that the shape of the acorn of the craft itself could be related to Die Glock, or the sinister Nazi Bell Project. Which, Bryce, maybe
I
we'll
might
have
be
to
covering next week.
So regardless of the truth behind the mysterious Kecksburg UFO crash, it is forever preserved in the folklore of the area. Every summer, with the exception of this one, thanks COVID, the town throws the Kecksburg UFO Festival, which raises funds for the volunteer fire department. And if you're in the area and you want to grab a photo, the UFO prop used in Unsolved Mysteries is on display in Kecksburg, posted on a tall post. So that's it. That's the story of the Kecksburg UFO incident, one of our lesser-known Roswell-type UFO crash stories here in the United States. And I got to tell you, researching this story and watching that Unsolved Mysteries made me want to binge every episode of Unsolved. Like, I want to get super baked and watch all of Unsolved Mysteries.
Do it.
Yes.
COVID won't stop you.
That's
right.
true.
Live your dream.
So what do you... yes, I'm social distancing myself from Robert Stack. Holly, what the hell was that?
Man, my mind was racing the whole time. I was like, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. It's sort of like, I don't know. I was thinking about the day I learned that shooting stars weren't stars that were dying out, but were just pieces of space garbage on fire. And I've never had a romantic moment since.
All my wishes turn to trash.
My mind was racing. I was like, is it just space garbage? Is it a thing? The slowing down is interesting. But honestly, the thing that felt the most unrealistic was the efficiency with which the supposed government or military kind of like cleaned it up.
Yeah, really.
Well, things were different back during the Cold War.
Yeah. I was going to say satellite, but you're right. It wasn't moving like a satellite. And
that's the big theory right now, is that it was a Cold War era satellite. But I don't know about the writing and all that stuff is really weird. You know?
Because listen, that's not the first time we've heard of a craft with these strange hieroglyphics. You see it time and time again, whether it's the Rendlesham Forest incident or the Socorro saucer. There's multiple cases with these strange hieroglyphics. It makes me wonder if, there was some lost civilization or something that might have. I mean, who knows? What is it a reference to? Right? I mean,
what
obviously
if it's
not Egyptian, but
what if it's some kind of military code? You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, perhaps, but I don't know. It's definitely strange.
It's strange that it would be like hieroglyphic. Sometimes I'm like, then it feels man-made if it's like Well, I don't know. I mean, we know from Arrival that if it was from aliens, it would be written in those circle kind of alphabets.
Yeah, and I don't think this was necessarily like straight up Egyptian hieroglyphics. It was just that's the closest thing he could compare
like
it to. That it was
symbols?
just symbols, but he could see stars and circles and lines and like.
I was in the bookstore the other day, and I came across Graham Hancock's Underworld, where it's this monumental undertaking where he explores sort of the depths of the ocean, and he finds all kinds of evidence for really lost civilizations that are resting on our ocean's floor. And I don't know, sometimes when you see these crafts, it's like perhaps these lost civilizations had access or gained, to these high-tech devices, and who knows, maybe they're able to scatter themselves across time or deliver
it's like
deliver us messages from these spacecrafts.
What if it's an ancient satellite that just came back down into Earth from like thousands of years ago?
Have you ever seen, because like we're sending out stuff like that, like that's the Drunk History I did was about the golden record that Carl Sagan and Andrea.
Sure.
Yeah. Like, have you seen the images that we chose to represent humanity that we sent into space?
Yeah. It was all the good stuff.
I know. But even like the font and the like drawings and stuff, there was so much room for improvement. Also, I love that we were like trying to represent what humanity looks like, but it was this fucking puritanical 1970s bullshit where they're like, you can't show the shape of a naked lady.
Yeah, we're gonna send a dick pic, but no boobs.
No, it's like, really? What are we talking about? So it's interesting to see like the way we represent ourselves, and then as like we swallow and we pee and everything. Like, I wonder what their
hieroglyphic of a man pooping.
It really makes a case for it. It just is what it is. It's a crashed alien probe or spaceship. Why not?
Yeah, why not? I say why not. And also, Michael, you can read me a bedtime story anytime. I was like totally riveted.
Oh, well, thank you. I live just down the street, so if if Greg falls asleep and you're having troubles, just give me a ring. I'll come on
You'll
down.
stand beneath my window with a flashlight and a book.
Oh, Holly, thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. What a fantastic guest. I wish we could talk to you for 2 more hours. We'll have to get you back on the show for one of our L-Files episodes. Maybe you and Greg can come do that.
I know. I feel like you unlocked a two-parter.
Yeah. And I couldn't have enjoyed myself more. I swear to God, like, you are lovely, lovely fellas and interviewers. And I don't know, just one last quick question. Have you heard the Kyle Kinane thing about Bigfoot?
No, but you're not the first person to bring that up to me. So I hear that we have to get him on the show.
So, yeah. Oh, you will love him. He's my favorite stand-up. I love him so much. And on his Whiskey Icarus album, you can like YouTube it or just pull it up on Spotify or something, but he has a whole thing about Bigfoot. And his thing about why people deny there's a Bigfoot is because if you've experienced Bigfoot, so what Bigfoot does is he sneaks into your tent and he fucks you. And so it's like the like survivor's mentality of like not telling nobody.
Tell your story now.
Yeah, exactly. So after I said bullshit on Bigfoot, I'm like, oh, now they're gonna know I fucked them. But you'll enjoy it. Kyle Kinane, Bigfoot. You'll love it. And thanks so much for the opportunity, fellas. I hope you have a great day. I hope you survive this COVID summer, man. I hope we make it past the summer solstice, June 21st. But if not, I'll see you in hell.
Well, Holly, don't go away too quickly. Don't run off into the night like Bigfoot too fast. Where can people find you on social media or to check out your work?
Mega the Podcast is our comedy podcast where it's a fully improvised satire where we play characters who work at a fictional mega church. It's so fun. We have a different guest on every week and they play a different like person in the church community. And then my Instagram is Holly Laurent and my Twitter is Laurent Holly. And and
maybe we'll throw your if you send us a link, we'll throw the short a link to your short film in our show notes.
That would be great.
Absolutely. I'll send it to you, fellas. You'll like it. Although now you've kind of already seen it in your mind. Because I told
We
you to.
really haven't. Follow us on Instagram at Bigfoot Collectors Club, on Twitter at Bigfoot Pod, and hey, merch, we've got it. Head over to campfire.media, click shop, and blast away on a number of BCC-themed t-shirts. Please give me a follow on Instagram at McMills. Bryce is Mr. Bryce Johnson, and Riley is at Peace Drone. Boys, anything else to plug? Riley, we've been getting a lot of questions about where people can listen to Spindrift or buy your music.
Oh my God! Well, the album is going to come out at some point. I don't know when still, but there's a bunch of albums already out on Spotify. We did give that sneak peek of one of the tracks to our Patreon subscribers, so thank you guys for that.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
great.
But
all right,
it's
Bryce.
coming. I don't know. Who knows?
Okay, sounds good. Bryce, anything to listen? Any plugs?
Nope, not right now, but news to come.
Great. Fantastic. Guys, head over to Apple Podcasts. Please give us a 5-star review. Keep it short and sweet, like Instagrandpa, who says, great discussions on the paranormal. Must listen. Thank you so much, everyone. I remain Michael McMillan for Bryce Johnson and Riley Bray. Until then, good night.
And go get regressed. Bigfoot Collectors Club is produced by Riley Bray. Our theme song is Come Alone by Suneaters, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. If you like the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps get the podcast to more listeners. To support the show, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club and unlock multiple reward episodes every month.